My marriage to Brandon was supposed to be the start of a new chapter in my life, filled with love, companionship, and shared dreams. But from the moment I said, "I do," I felt a creeping sense of unease. It began with subtle criticisms from Mrs. Thompson, Brandon's mother, disguised as well-meaning advice. "You know, dear," she would say with a saccharine smile, "I couldn't help but notice the way you cooked that roast. Perhaps next time you should follow my recipe. Brandon loves it when I make it." At first, I brushed off her comments, chalking them up to the natural adjustments that come with joining a new family. But as weeks turned into months, her criticisms became more frequent and pointed, leaving me questioning every decision I made. One evening, as Brandon and I sat down to dinner, Mrs. Thompson couldn't resist making yet another jab. "Teresa, dear, do you really think that dress is flattering on you?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "Perhaps something a bit more. Slimming would be better." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment as Brandon remained silent, his eyes fixed on his plate. It was as if he didn't even notice his mother's cutting remarks, or worse, he didn't care. "Mom, please," Brandon finally spoke up, though his voice lacked conviction. "Can we just enjoy dinner without the critiques?" Mrs. Thompson huffed in response, but the damage had already been done. I pushed my food around my plate, my appetite gone, as the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. That night, as I lay in bed next to Brandon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong with our marriage. And little did I know, it was only the beginning of the unraveling knot that would soon ensnare us all. The onset of the flu hit me like a freight train, leaving me bedridden and utterly helpless. Feverish and weak, I could do nothing but lie there, trapped in a haze of sickness and misery. But even in my vulnerable state, Mrs. Thompson's venomous words continued to pierce through the fog, relentless in their cruelty. "You are still in bed, Teresa?" she remarked, her voice dripping with disdain as she entered the room. Honestly, I've never met anyone so lazy in my life. What kind of wife can't even take care of herself when she's sick? I wanted to scream, to lash out at her with every ounce of strength I had left, but all I could manage was a feeble nod, my throat raw and scratchy from coughing. Brandon hovered in the doorway, his expression torn between concern and discomfort. "Mom, maybe you should give Teresa some space," he suggested weakly, though his words held little weight. Mrs. Thompson ignored him, her gaze fixed on me with a mixture of disdain and disappointment. "Honestly, Brandon, I don't know what you see in her. She's nothing but a burden." Tears stung my eyes as I struggled to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. I longed for Brandon to defend me, to tell his mother to leave me alone. But he remained silent, a passive bystander in the face of his mother's relentless onslaught. As Mrs. Thompson continued to berate me, I felt a sense of despair wash over me, like I was drowning in a sea of sickness and sorrow. Little did I know, the storm that was brewing within me was nothing compared to the tempest that was about to be unleashed. In the midst of my illness, a nagging doubt gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. What if Brandon and I were never legally married? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, filling me with a sense of dread. Desperate for answers, I mustered the strength to reach out to a lawyer, hoping against hope that my suspicions would prove unfounded. As I sat in the lawyer's office, my heart pounding in my chest, I laid out my fears, trembling with anticipation. The lawyer listened attentively, her expression unreadable as she processed the information I had provided. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm and measured. "Based on what you've told me, it's possible that your marriage to Brandon may not be legally binding." The words hit me like a ton of bricks, knocking the wind out of me. I struggled to comprehend the implications of what she was saying, the world spinning around me in a dizzying blur. How was that possible? I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. The lawyer sighed, her gaze sympathetic. It appears that there may have been some irregularities in the paperwork submitted for your marriage license. Without proper documentation, your marriage could be considered void. I felt as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath me, leaving me teetering on the edge of a precipice. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, was suddenly called into question. As I left the lawyer's office, my mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Could Brandon and his mother have orchestrated a scheme to test my suitability as a wife? The thought filled me with a sickening sense of betrayal. But deep down, I knew I had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Armed with the unsettling truth about the potential illegitimacy of my marriage, I knew I couldn't continue to bury my suspicions. The confrontation I had been dreading loomed before me like a dark cloud, but I refused to back down. With a steely determination coursing through my veins, I confronted Brandon and his mother, determined to uncover the truth once and for all. As I stood before them, my hands trembling with a mixture of fear and anger, Mrs. Thompson's eyes narrowed with thinly veiled disdain. "What is the meaning of this, Teresa?" she demanded, her voice icy with contempt. "Have you lost your mind?" I squared my shoulders, refusing to cower under her withering gaze. "I know what you've been doing, Mrs. Thompson," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I know about the scam you and Brandon pulled to test my suitability as a wife." Brandon's eyes widened in shock, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Teresa, what are you talking about?" he stammered, his voice betraying his panic. "Don't play dumb, Brandon," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "I've spoken to a lawyer. Our marriage may not even be legally binding because of your deceit." Mrs. Thompson's mask of indifference slipped, revealing a flash of fury beneath. "How dare you accuse us of such a thing?" she spat, her voice rising to a crescendo. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough," I thundered, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. "I'm tired of your lies and manipulation. I want the truth, and I want it now." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the sound of our ragged breathing. And then, finally, Brandon spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's true," he admitted, his gaze fixed on the floor. We wanted to see if you were worthy of being a part of our family." The admission hung between us like a dark cloud, casting a pall over the room. But as painful as it was to hear, a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The truth was out in the open, and no matter the consequences, I knew I could finally begin to move forward. The confrontation with Brandon and his mother had been a long time coming, but what followed was beyond anything I could have imagined. As the truth of their deception spilled out into the open, the repercussions reverberated far beyond the confines of our home. It began innocuously enough, with murmurs of gossip and speculation floating through the neighborhood like a toxic cloud. But soon, those whispers turned into full-blown accusations, as the truth of Brandon's deceit became impossible to ignore. One fateful evening, as I returned home from running errands, I found myself accosted by a group of Brandon's coworkers and neighbors, their faces twisted with disgust and disbelief. "Is it true?" one of them demanded, his voice laced with anger. "Did Brandon really scam you into marrying him?" I felt the blood drain from my face as all eyes turned to me, waiting for confirmation of the rumors that had been swirling through the community like wildfire. I knew I couldn't hide from the truth any longer. "Yes," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's true." The reaction was immediate and visceral. Gasps of shock rippled through the crowd, followed by a cacophony of angry voices raised in condemnation. Brandon's coworkers turned their backs on him, their once friendly faces twisted with scorn and contempt. As the truth of Brandon's deceit became public knowledge, the facade he had carefully constructed began to crumble, revealing the ugly truth beneath. And though it was painful to witness, there was a small part of me that felt a sense of vindication, knowing that justice, however delayed, had finally caught up to him. But amidst the chaos and turmoil, one thing became abundantly clear. Brandon and his mother would face consequences for their actions, consequences that would irrevocably alter the course of their lives. And though the road ahead would be long and difficult, I knew that I was finally free from the tangled web of lies that had ensnared us all. The fallout from the public exposure of Brandon and his mother's deceit was swift and unforgiving. As the news spread like wildfire through our neighborhood, the repercussions rippled far and wide, leaving a trail of shattered reputations and broken dreams in its wake. For Brandon, the consequences were immediate and devastating. He lost his job, his once promising career reduced to rubble in the blink of an eye. The co-workers who had once looked up to him now turned their backs, their trust shattered beyond repair. As we faced the harsh reality of our new circumstances, Brandon's mother, Mrs. Thompson, bore the brunt of the community's scorn. Once revered as a pillar of the neighborhood, she was now a social pariah, her once flourishing social circle reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. Amidst the chaos and turmoil, Brandon and his mother retreated into seclusion, their once glamorous life reduced to a mere shell of its former self. But even in their darkest hour, there was no solace to be found, no refuge from the storm of public condemnation that raged outside their door. As we struggled to come to terms with the fallout from their deception, Brandon and I found ourselves on opposite sides of a gaping chasm, our once solid foundation crumbling beneath us. And though the road ahead would be long and difficult, I knew that we would each have to face the consequences of our actions in our own way. Yet, amidst the chaos and turmoil, there were moments of unexpected clarity. As the dust began to settle, I found myself filled with a sense of liberation, knowing that I was finally free from the suffocating grip of Brandon and his mother's deceit. But as I looked towards the uncertain future that lay ahead, one thing became abundantly clear. We would each have to face the fallout from their actions, no matter how painful it might be. And though the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, I knew that I was stronger than I had ever imagined, ready to face whatever obstacles lay in my path with a newfound sense of determination and resilience. In the aftermath of the scandal that rocked our lives, I found myself standing amidst the rubble of what had once been my marriage and my sense of security. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, I realized that amidst the destruction, there lay the opportunity for rebirth, for the chance to rebuild from the ruins of my shattered dreams. As I picked up the pieces of my life, I found solace in the simple routines that had once seemed mundane. Each day brought with it a new sense of purpose, a renewed determination to forge a path forward, no matter how uncertain it may seem. With the support of friends who stood by me through it all, I began to rebuild, brick by brick, laying the foundation for a new life. Though the wounds of betrayal still lingered, I refused to let them define me, choosing instead to focus on the possibilities that lay ahead. Yet, amidst the tumult of rebuilding, there were moments of doubt, moments when the weight of the past threatened to drag me down into despair. But each time I faltered, I found strength in the knowledge that I was not alone, that there were others who had walked this path before me and emerged stronger on the other side. One evening, as I sat with a close friend, sipping tea and sharing stories of our shared struggles, she reached out and took my hand, her gaze filled with understanding. "I know it's not easy," she said softly, her voice tinged with empathy. "But remember, every ending is also a new beginning. And though the road ahead may be difficult, you are stronger than you know. You will rebuild, Teresa, and you will emerge from this stronger than ever before." Her words struck a chord deep within me, igniting a spark of hope that had long lay dormant. And as I looked towards the future with renewed determination, I knew that no matter what obstacles lay ahead, I would face them head on, armed with the knowledge that I was capable of overcoming anything that stood in my way. In the quiet moments that followed the chaos of the scandal, I sought refuge in the simple pleasures that had once brought me joy. Amidst the tumult of rebuilding my life, I found solace in the gentle rhythm of everyday routines, the warm embrace of a good book, the soothing aroma of a cup of tea, the laughter shared with friends who had stood by me through it all. One evening, as I sat curled up on the couch with a book in hand, there was a soft knock at the door. Startled, I set the book aside and made my way to answer it, wondering who could be calling at such a late hour. To my surprise, standing on the doorstep was Sarah, a dear friend who had been a source of unwavering support throughout the turmoil of the past few months. Her presence brought with it a sense of comfort, a reminder that I was not alone in my struggles. "Sarah, what a pleasant surprise," I exclaimed, stepping aside to let her in. "Please, come in." Sarah smiled warmly, her eyes filled with empathy as she took in the sight of me. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said softly. "I just wanted to check in and see how you're holding up." Her words touched me deeply, reminding me of the strength and resilience that lay within me. "I'm doing my best," I replied with a grateful smile. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm finding my way." As we settled onto the couch together, Sarah reached out and took my hand in hers, her touch a comforting anchor amidst the storm of emotions swirling within me. "You're stronger than you know, Teresa," she said gently. "And though the road ahead may be difficult, know that I'll be here every step of the way." Tears welled in my eyes as I looked into Sarah's kind gaze, filled with gratitude for the unwavering support she had shown me throughout the darkest moments of my life. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with a renewed sense of strength and resilience, knowing that I was not alone in my journey towards healing and redemption. As the dust settled and the wounds began to heal, I found myself standing on the threshold of a new beginning, filled with equal parts trepidation and hope. The journey that had brought me to this moment had been long and arduous, marked by betrayal, heartache, and loss. Yet, in the face of adversity, I had discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed, a strength born from the ashes of my shattered dreams. With each passing day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through my veins, propelling me forward towards a future that was mine to shape. Though the scars of the past still lingered, they no longer held the power to define me. Instead, they served as a reminder of the resilience that lay within me, a testament to the unwavering spirit that had carried me through the darkest of times. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden, basking in the warmth of the sun, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Turning, I saw Sarah making her way towards me, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Teresa," she greeted me warmly, taking a seat beside me on the bench. "How are you feeling today?" I smiled in return, grateful for her presence. "I'm doing better," I admitted. "Each day brings its own challenges, but I'm learning to take them in stride." Sarah nodded, her gaze filled with understanding. "You've come a long way, Teresa," she said softly. "And though the road ahead may be uncertain, know that you're not alone. We're all here to support you, every step of the way." Her words warmed my heart, filling me with a sense of gratitude for the friends who had stood by me through thick and thin. In that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, I was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that I was capable of overcoming anything that came my way. As I looked towards the horizon, the sun sinking low in the sky, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Though the journey ahead would be long and challenging, I knew that I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing that each new day brought with it the promise of a fresh start. a new beginning filled with endless possibilities.